This is the June 17th meeting of the Blue Ribbon Committee on Municipal Building. And I'll take the roll quickly. Renee Plummer is not here. Rick Chellman.
I'm here.
Susan Sterry. Peter Weeks.
Here.
Cameron Horak, I believe, will not be able to make it. John O'Leary.
Yeah.
Chief Newport. Commissioner Schur.
Here, I think.
Okay, and from staff, we have Carl Weber, Deputy City Manager, Peter Rice, DPW Director, Joe Almeida, the Facilities Manager, and from JSA, North Sturtevant, and Richard Marks. And
Don't forget yourselves.
yes, Councilor Cook, co-chair, myself, John Tabor, co-chair, and Councilor Bagley, council representative. So we have minutes. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes?
Will they be accepted as presented?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
I think that's a first. Project status update. Take it away, Carl.
I can start. So, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to thank everyone for being here, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for your thoughtfulness, consistency, and participation in this process. This has been a highly engaged committee, and the input along the way has really helped us continue to see what we're going to review today. I said in other meetings, all feedback is a gift, and this committee has certainly given us lots of gifts along the way, and I'm sure we'll have many more to follow. But more importantly, over the course of these meetings, the feedback we received really helped us refine some of the pieces of this project that you'll see here today, how departments relate to one another, conversations around adjacencies, and those have been particularly valuable, and we'll continue to refine those as we see how does it lay out, are there things that need to happen. A really good example is you see that co-location of welfare, public health, and social work, which really becomes more of an integrative social services area, and that just doesn't only improve internal coordination, but it simplifies the experience for those in need, making it easier to navigate services, access help when they need it. Another example, and you'll see the update in your packet regarding the school department. Thanks again to Mr. Weeks for asking every time we met. And about moving some of the educational operation closer to the action where the education is happening, creates some space and opportunities, lets us maximize the space in here. But one of the most important things, it also maximizes the need for additional space to swing people into during this project, and that's really important. Part of what you'll see when Richard talks about the phasing is we're trying to use a move once philosophy, which is we move you out of your space, we move you into another space instead of moving you multiple times, which causes multiple fit-ups and multiple distractions and multiple disruptions to service. So we appreciate that. The other is, you'll see in this project, this concept as well, the feedback on, hey, if you're building an addition, capture the space below. And so that is reflective here too. Richard can talk in more detail on that, but it looks like it's about 50 cents on the dollar to do that. So it makes sense to sort of, how do we build that in so we don't regret not getting that space while you're already building an addition on any addition that's needed. But also I think it's important that, the evolution of this project has continued to grow. We started originally as the sort of police focus, and now it's become the municipal complex. And that evolution is really important because we're looking at how do we provide the operational needs of the PD, but also a point of service, better customer service, better access, and you'll see that reflected in here too. The other thing that's important is you're going to start seeing, which I think everyone's been waiting for, is pricing, phasing, and all those things. But so far, based on the preliminary work, it appears that a lot can be done. When you look at the phasing, we're trying to offer you, the committee and the community, something that really substantial can get done on both the PD, operational need, and the point of service for those first 5 phases. At the same time, we want to be really clear about where we are in the process. We're going to be reviewing a lot of concepts. The cost information is just the beginning. These are rough order of magnitude. They're not intended to be perfect. They're intended to give us scale, trade-offs, phasing, and again, to gather more input to see what's feasible over time. And this is a critical point in the process. We continue to want your feedback along the way, and we really appreciate that, especially as we think about when do we start introducing public outreach, soliciting feedback, and sort of going back and checking in and making recommendations to the council. So thanks again for all the hard work that was taken to get here. Richard from JSA will walk through the rest, and the staff, as always, is here to answer questions that you might have about details. But it's starting to come together. We really want to have continued feedback along the way. So thank you for all that you've done so far.
Thank you. Very nice introduction. I'll pull up the plans in just a second, but as you saw in your packets today, we're presenting one concept for the moment. In the past, we've presented 3 concepts, A through C, and as we made a couple of key moves that I'll expand on, the A and C concepts started to merge together to really work out quite nicely. At this point in time, we're dropping concept B, which called for a second story on top of the sally port. Again, that could always be a consideration, but as we've worked more and more with the plans, that seems less and less viable and less desirable, which I think is ultimately a benefit to the project. The concept, I'll pull up the plans for us. Sorry, one moment. So I'm trying to pull up the plans, but while that thinks, why don't we flip in the packet to the floor plans? We can start at the lowest level and work our way up. Try to get those pulled up. Let's start with them. So what we're showing today, this current concept has roughly 8,000 square feet of new addition. As Carl noted and discussed in our last meeting, we're looking at capturing basement spaces, 50 cents on the dollar roughly. Why wouldn't we capture that? And that's about another 7,000 square feet of space that we're showing that's been delineated. On the basement level, there's not been substantial changes since we last reviewed. That, for the moment, that works well and operates. What we'll really see the changes is on the upper floor. So if we flip to floor 1, you see the sally port remains as we've been showing, roughly that footprint. We are showing the court space next to the main lobby. We've made some refinements. We met with the courts team to review their space and really confirm what their needs were and that this would work for them. In addition, you'll note just adjacent to there the claimed basement storage beneath the second floor addition there, and along the back of the building beneath the vault. Again, that's useful, flexible space that could be fit out for any number of storage purposes, archives, swing space. It's always a need. If we can go to floor 2, this is where, this is really where the fun and the meat of it is. I'll keep going. Thank you. So in floor 2, the full screen. There we go. Sorry. Thank you for your patience. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. Okay. Now we should be able to see everything. There we go. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. So floor 2 is where a lot of the changes have happened and a lot of the improvements. Really, there's 2 key things we discussed in the last meeting that have now started to loosen up a lot of the plan and make things work nicely. The first was the shared training and renovation of the council chambers, trying to merge those functions to an extent. That has allowed us to have some flexibility, and the other is the school department. By having that space available on the 4th floor, we've been able to move HR up, and that's allowed this plan to work much nicely. So I'll kind of go through this plan in a little more detail. First of all, just thinking about the point of service and the flow for the public, we've been able to maintain sort of the existing entry access aligned with the parking lot. You come in and you're aligned with the Portsmouth room, the council chambers, that sort of key access of the building remains. The point of service is right immediately adjacent to you when you enter the building. Oh, actually, I should probably zoom in a little bit for you. There we go. you enter in, tax and clerk windows would all be immediately adjacent. You're not wandering to, another wing of the building. It is right there. Previous concepts had that shifted over to the right further on the other side of the school board conference room. We've been able to bring that immediately adjacent to the entrance, and really it improves that flow with waiting right across the way. There's a real immediacy to it that the plan now has. In terms of the point of service as well, you'll see assessors is located where HR currently is on the right side of the building. They still are located near the point of service. They're happy with that location. It gives them the space they need to do their job, and they have less foot traffic than tax and clerk, who are 75, 80, 90% of the day-to-day. Looking at really the meeting and shared trading spaces, that whole area has obviously undergone some revisions. You'll see the council chambers, as we discussed last time. How can we better utilize that space? It's underutilized during the day. We could foresee renovating that into a multi-purpose space that could be used both as full council chambers as well as divided up into one larger or two smaller meeting spaces, something more modern, something with proper AV, proper lighting, that really could be utilized throughout the day for a variety of functions. In addition, we are showing a conference room and shared training space immediately to the entrance that's built on top of the court space on level 1. We did validate the need to have a second meeting space, basically to replace the school board conference room that's currently used. There are times that you need to have a school board meeting or a public meeting that's also concurrent with the council chambers. In addition, on the police department side, there are times that they'll have multiple day trainings, and it's not really reasonable to always take down the council chambers for multiple days when there's evening events day after day after day. And there are times that the police department may need to take over, take that space for something on short notice. The president's coming to town, they need to coordinate all the logistics involved. There's a need for that second space, and this would accommodate that, as well as a variety of public meetings and functions. Again, right adjacent to the entrance, adjacent to the point of service, all of that access is right there.
Is that a movable wall between the two?
Yes, in the council chambers, we would imagine in this concept layout, 1 to 2 movable walls so that you could divide the space up into multiple individual rooms, one large room, council room. You can sort of shift and flex it based off the need and the occupants.
And how would it be configured for a council meeting or a board meeting?
You'd imagine in a council meeting, you would have the whole space opened up. You can see sort of the council seating here over the left.
So
And you would imagine you'd open up those walls, turn all the seating 90 degrees, everyone facing there, and you could fit a good chunk of people. If it's just plain seating like you show on the right-hand side, you can fit upwards of 100 to 120 people in that room. So the layout worked, in our opinion, surprisingly well, better than we thought when we were first testing it. Lastly, with sort of the freed up space of the school department move and being able to open things up a bit, we have been able to maintain, as Carl said, the co-location of health, welfare, social work, that sort of social health synergy. All those departments have been able to be co-located. When we had met last meeting, some of the concepts had moved social work up to the 3rd floor simply because we didn't have space on this floor to fit everyone. We're able to sort of achieve that adjacency now, which I think is a real plus.
One question, how are we handling entry elevations?
So what we would propose to do at the main entrance is stairs and an adjacent ramp to get up that grade change. So rather than having a wheelchair lift right inside the entrance or coming in on a lower level and then taking a ramp or elevator up, we would have a ramp at the entrance to get up to that elevation.
You want to talk about your thoughts about winter?
Yep. So we have something we'll show a little bit later. We would imagine that this would be underneath a canopy to help with snow and rain. And in addition, we've already talked about the idea of having a snow melt system in and around this area, which would make sure that there isn't an accumulation of ice and snow in those winter conditions. And we discussed the location of this ramp. Is it here? Does it stretch out further? And this is really, the ideal location. We see this as the one central entrance. It's adjacent to where the handicap parking would be, as well as the main parking lot, since a lot of the ramp users and lift users right now are honestly, mothers and fathers with small children and strollers. You see a lot of that foot traffic. So keeping it located right there makes all the sense in the world.
Am I correct in seeing that the let's call it the Sallyport addition only takes up parking spaces, police department parking spaces? It doesn't take up any public parking spaces?
That is a correct statement, yeah. And we're working hard to keep it within the boundaries of those existing 4 parking spaces and not extend beyond that, both visually as well as maintaining the existing flow of traffic. If we can stay out of that existing drive aisle, it makes life easier, and it seems like that's very achievable.
Chief doesn't need a parking space.
I think lastly on this floor, simply that we are across from where the current school board conference room is. We're showing a stair and elevator. We've been working on that area to try and improve the vertical circulation to the upper floors, and we continue to work on that to see what's the best way to accommodate that. We hope that works well.
I have one other question on that space in particular. Where we have the clerk registrar space, is it possible to have that be staff-only space? It's showing kind of as common area corridor,
Correct.
but it looks to me like all the public interaction is in the hallway. I want to make sure that the clerk is not constantly keying in and out between one space and another space,
It's great that you asked that. We just met with the registrar's and the clerk's office this week, and what you'll probably see on another iteration is where you see the break room and everything will swap, and the clerk's office will move down, and we're working with the registrar's office around what do they need when they have to meet with someone versus when they do their work privately. And so we're working out some of the details on that, so it's great. So this will be a little bit reconfigured after we met with them. But that's a great point. We're trying to move it. What we're trying to figure out is where to put the vault, because there's times that they're accessing the vault, but there are also times that residents come in to look for something in the vault, an old record. So we need a place for them to sort of sit, bring the record out to them and put it back in the vault. What we wrestle with is the back is the best place to put it because it's sort of hidden from view versus putting it in the front. So we're trying to figure out if we can configure it in a way that there's a practical way to use the vault in addition to secure storage within the space in the clerk's office. So we're working through some of those details now, but that's a great question.
I have a quick question. I didn't think about this before, but where the Sallyport is, how often, and this is probably for the chief, how often do people coming to get records from them or just to talk to a police officer park in that area where those 4 parking spaces
Those are police-only parking spots now.
Oh, there's a handicap
There's a-
spot and there's a 15-minute spot that will have to be relocated.
Oh, yeah, because I know people do park there for.
So I think they would park where you see the other spaces and walk in the new entrance for that.
Where the regular parking is, where everybody is.
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Briefly go to the 3rd and 4th floors, though the 2nd floor is the meat of it. Simply with the adjustments that we've discussed with the school department and adjusting of departments, we can accommodate building and planning in their entirety on the 3rd floor. All the space needs. Previous concepts had to sandwich them together more so we could feed either human resources or IT on this floor. We're able to realize the full breadth of the space for those 2 departments. I feel very comfortable with that.
And a lot of conference rooms.
So the logic behind that, and the logic behind that both for planning and building was, right now, both departments have a lot of small meetings that happen in their offices. A one-person meeting, or the inspectors are meeting each with individual contractors. They do a lot of that in private offices right now. We're looking to go more to a workstation model with them. So one of the items discussed was, if we're doing that, can we have a couple of small conference rooms to facilitate those conversations that currently happen in our offices? And so that's the logic at this point in time.
I think the other important thing on this is being able to move the social work down a floor. There's now a flex space up here, and what that will help with is during construction, you could flex people in and out of there. But the way that what you see is copy mail, if the mailroom, if one day that space needed to be allocated to the city, you could put the entrance through that area and secure it off from the PD as well. So we're sort of trying to set aside spaces that make sense for the future as well.
You'll see when we go through phasing how we're gonna utilize that space, suite space. And then lastly, on the fourth floor, the main revision again is with the school department being relocated. We have in the Cybele building, IT and human resources up on this floor. We're really able to maintain a sort of administrative floor, everyone being co-located. Finance would be on this floor, and then you'll see sort of the dashed red area. Even with the school department moving, there is some need for space. There will be a couple of staff members, really their financial positions that would stay co-located to finance. And then a little bit of touchdown space for when the school department needs to come, or honestly, any other department needs to come and work more closely all day with whichever of the departments, whether it's finance, city manager. There's a little bit of space that is available for that.
Or you have outside consultants come in, you need a space for them that works for that too.
Good point.
When the auditors are here and then that's dedicated space, it's like
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
that.
So we have room for some shared office, private office, a conference room, that type of hoteling space. So we're, in short, with those couple of moves, it's feeling like the plan is starting to gel more than it has in the past, and some of those difficult spots that we were wrestling with have now worked themselves off. Previously there was always one department that was not in a great space, and we've been able to avoid that now, which is really nice. We're always having to build on top of the police lobby, which was possible but difficult. We're able to avoid doing that. So it's feeling like it's really starting to work nicely. Before we jump into the next subject, is there any other questions or items you want to discuss, just sort of on the plan, space planning?
Could I just make a comment, please? Carl started off by thanking us for all of our input, and I appreciate that. And I've seen it around this table that a lot of people have had thoughts that, again, put them out there, see what happens. But what we've seen here is what you've done with that input. And input is only good if it's used appropriately and taken into consideration, and you end up with a good result. So I want to thank the staff and the people from JSA for working together to come up with something that I frankly didn't think we'd end up with. This certainly, if we look at what we were looking at in the beginning, we were looking at the needs of the police department. We introduced the idea of the point of service. And we've also tried to address the massing, the visual impact of what we're doing. And what I see here is this result, while it's not the final result, certainly checks all of those boxes. And those involved in taking that input and considering it and putting it into effect deserve a great deal of credit. So thank you.
Other question, Peter?
I want to reiterate basically the same as I think the staff has done a great job putting up with some of our questions over the months. But finally implementing some of them and to make a plan better. My only concern, and I happened to have been at a meeting yesterday with Carl, that we have included in this, and he assures me that between staff and JSA that we're taking care of the deficiencies in the existing municipal building which exist, that so we have to look at everything. And he assures me that both the staff and JSA have looked at those deficiencies and have included in their estimates to make sure that we get everything done that we need to get done. And you should be complimented for that.
Other questions, comments? Councilors?
Before we move on, Richard, do you want to talk about just the philosophy on putting that elevator in there and the access versus using the existing? I think that's an important piece to talk about. Is what you'll notice on these plans is the way new stairwell and elevator is centrally located right off the entrance. Creates essentially easy access to go up a floor and then move right in that public space to go interact with those departments. Maybe Richard can talk about alternatives, but one of the reasons why we're putting it there is to right off the lobby instead of having to go to either end of the building to go up a floor. But any other thoughts on that?
You could kind of hit the key points. It's immediacy. You're right off the lobby. You would have a nice new functioning elevator and stair that vertically gets you up to then the sort of center point between each department. So when you go to the third floor, and the fourth floor, for example, you'll notice that that's centrally located. You can get off the elevator. To your right would be planning. To your left would be a building. They're both right there. You can come up, do your service, do what you need to do, come back down, and it keeps that nice secure boundary. If we utilize the existing elevators, obviously it's a bit more of a travel distance for residents to come to work. And while we can probably work it, it makes the logistics, particularly in the building side, a little more hard in terms of where's that secure line, because that elevator now is right in the middle of the floor plate. And instead of having those departments, together, it sort of divides them a little bit. You can see that on the fourth floor more.
We're trying to be very conscious of this along the way of how much do you have to travel to get service. And the point of service, if you notice, all those windows are right off the lobby. It's right there. 90% of the activity is there. But then we thought for the other departments that also interact, it's a quick trip, and then the service is right there without walking all the way across the building. And the more you spend time in the building, you realize it's a long walk for some people to get to certain services.
You can probably imagine that the Seibold elevator, the existing one here, that might become staff only because it's sort of behind the secure line. The existing elevators here in the 63 building, those would need to remain for some public, but that's a lot less than the foot traffic. If you're visiting the legal department, city manager's office, you're going to need to take those elevators because it's on that side of the building. But for 90% of the other foot traffic, building, planning, HR, who have a lot of candidates they interview, that all is right there in that court.
And I think the other, and we can put the chief on the spot if we need to, one of the questions I kept asking, because some of the committee questions were, does this meet the operational needs of the police department? And we really tried to work hard to make sure that those needs were met. And you could speak to that, chief, about it. And we chatted a little bit along this way. We've been interacting of, does this meet those needs? It's not everything you might particularly want or desire, but does it meet those operational needs of the department?
Yeah, and for the most part, it meets our needs. It's not 100% like we got everything we want, but we can work with it. And I think, as we work through this, we may move a couple of things here or there, but it definitely gets us in the direction that we would need to be.
What are changes that might need to be made, Chief?
Because these are just conceptual sketches. We don't have actual square footage of each room, and maybe some of the adjacencies that are, in there may switch around as we start moving forward in here. The one thing I did notice in here that I think we're missing is the animal control officer office. So, they're going to be little things, but overall, I'm happy with the direction we're going.
If I could just quickly, as someone who's been involved with this for years, that you can feel momentum building, and the project is in the best place that it's been in years since certainly I've been involved with it. So we feel momentum building on the staff side. We're excited about it. We see it physically taking shape architecturally. We see the spaces and the adjacencies working. So excitement and momentum is building, thanks to input from everyone.
Like some of these offices where you see if they're going to have windows or not. Some offices that seem like they have windows right now may not be the best spot for that real estate because they don't need windows. So little things like that, I think.
Yeah, I was curious, in the basement floor, we've got the lockers and the weight room. Do we not want those areas facing out through the windows? We've got a corridor separating the windows.
Yeah, like things like that, I'm familiar with at this point. Just looking at the location, we can work with it. trying not to get into the weeds and just look at the broad scope.
I think we'll find too, specifically to this basement level, that, you know, we're showing in the new Sallyport some more storage. We may find that we wanna shift lockers into that new addition so that we can make better use of the spaces adjacent to the mechanical room as we start to work through all the MEP infrastructure of the building. We know we have space for it, we're feeling comfortable with the direction that that is going, which we will be addressing. But we will move things around in the building as we work through nuances like that. But we feel we have enough space that we can make everything fit, whether it be here or here.
And from a pricing standpoint, it's, the important thing is the allocation of the space types. So, that's the way we're kind of working in the estimates.
There's no more questions. Austin, please.
Yeah, it's remarkably better.
So part of what you're gonna see here is the summary of cost and phasing. Sort of the red line is where we put in the, you know, what we think might be possible. What was originally conceived as just the PD, what's remaining in the allocation there. Again, these have lots of soft costs and lots of contingencies, and these are, again, rough numbers. As we continue to refine these, we may see these get refined. Obviously, when things go up to bid, things get much more specific. But we're trying to walk through, is there a logical break in these phases to get a lot? And what we're gonna try to, we'll walk through is what you get in those phases, but what we're trying to accomplish is, can we get the PD done and the point of service started and functionally working for the residents as you look at what's left on floors that might, you know, take a little bit longer. You can sort of look at the flow of the bonds and when would this make sense to do, and fourth floor, third floor, you know, much further down the road. But we're really trying to give it a logical way. And the key is also, and Richard will walk through that, is what's the logical way to make it work, which is also important. And the Move One's philosophy will be that some folks might be gone for a little while, and then it'll take a while before they come back based on the construction schedule.
Before you get into that, in looking at this, and maybe this is a question for Peter Rice. The deficiencies in the building, heating, air conditioning, that type of mechanical things. Didn't you at one point said that could cost $15 to $16 million to handle that in the building?
Yeah, I think it was closer to 10, 11, but yeah. And so the value of this is that we're leveraging those monies and stretching, you know, getting the work done that's necessary. At the same time, we're improving the function of the building.
Because one of the things, at least for the council representatives, we are now, according to the chief, pretty much taking care of the police department's needs and taking care of City Hall's needs for no more than what the police and the additions, mechanical additions, were gonna need to be done. So if your estimates are good, then you've done one hell of a job.
I have a question about the column that's headed bid year. So those dates are not the completion date, they're the, what is the meaning of the bid year?
That would, at the moment, that would be when it would start construction. Go to bid, start construction. Some of those phases might drag a little longer, some might get completed in a year, some might be 6 months. But that's the point, when you go out to bid is when you fix those costs, when you fully realize them.
That's anticipated escalation.
Right. And so these dates we've put sort of, this is our first pass of, here's what we think could be accomplished in these dates. those might change a little bit, especially once we get a CM on board that's gonna say, well, we actually need to do this then, and this then, and this is gonna be much more complicated than you think, those kinds of things, but this is our rough guess of what.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, I know Police Commission, the police department, we've been for a few years now in the sooner the better. So I'm wondering the space between mid-2026, where we are now, and the start of construction 2028, it seems like a long time. Could you describe what's going on between now and 2028?
If I could
It seems like a really short time to me.
If I could feel that.
That's why I'm not what you do, I don't do what you guys do.
So recognizing how complex the work we've done to date is, imagine now the level of complexity to the physical construction documents that have to detail and dimension every little piece and how to do it. That alone, the construction documents alone may take a year, correct? And then to contract, to go through the bidding process and select a contractor is a very time-consuming process as well. So, yeah, I'm with Peter.
I get that. Just to follow up on that, do these estimated construction costs and soft cost figures, understanding these are just estimates now, do they change?
They get escalated. What's the annual escalation?
So this is not what we expect the cost will be in 2028 when we start construction?
No, it is escalated, it is
It is.
anticipated, and construction costs, future dollars,
6.7,
totally
yeah.
escalated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Future dollars.
I was gonna note, also remember, our fiscal year is July 1, so it's really only a year till we're in fiscal year 2028. So it's not 2 years. It feels like 2 years, it's only a year.
It's not a calendar, we're not dealing with a calendar.
I have a quick question. So in that process, you can't start putting up, obviously, bids or for anything until they complete what you call it, the construction plans or the blueprints?
They can't even do that till the council authorizes the,
Oh, okay.
Which we'll have next Monday.
Councilman,
Just thought I'd
Thank you.
So,
And
and so then, after that, how many bids will you send out? I mean, just what's the general process?
So we haven't landed on procurement yet, because there's a couple different ways you can go about doing it. We don't believe a design build is a good way of doing it. The construct manage approach is probably where we'll be at the end, or guarantee maximum prices. So it's because it's an old building, there's a lot of moving parts. When you start moving, there's going to be additional design when they, each phase will inform things. So, hopefully we can find a really good contractor to work with, and that leads us through most of the broad projects. That'd be great, but it may not.
So we may have different contractors for different phases, so somebody
Potentially.
might do, 1 through 3, and then somebody else might just pick up 1 or 2, right?
Potentially.
And then usually how long does it take after the council has to approve the contractor, or
No.
do you get?
No, the money's,
They just
that's
authorize the
that's
money,
management's role.
And then
Direction and
how-
money.
How long after that does it take before a contractor could start?
It depends on the contractor. I mean, you have procurement of materials, you have shop drawings, so you have materials that they submit to us and saying, are these acceptable? Do they match what our plan was, so we know that the quality of materials is appropriate?
Right.
So
No,
there's a process to go through.
Right.
Typically, you bid, it takes a couple months to get bonds and all the contract paperwork finalized. You need to have legal review it. So once that's done, you then get the startup phase, and then there'll be a lot of site work to start, to have laydown areas.
Right.
There's a lot of work that's got to get done to get started.
I understand that even doing a small project, like rebuilding the wall down at the cemetery, I saw how involved, that's why I asked. So these are really just estimated times that an actual build will start. It may actually be later than
we
2028.
can actually write into the bid documents the date and time we want a contractor to start. We can do that, but what happens is we want to be as flexible as we possibly can, so we don't eliminate
Right.
outstanding bids. But we have the ability to say, upon upon signing of the contract, you must start the next day, or you must start a month later, or a week later.
Right.
We can determine that, and typically, it happens right away. It's within a month, contractors are starting on most projects that I've seen in the city.
Councilor
Right, I'm
Bagley's
just-
been waiting patiently.
Okay.
Sue, did you, I'm sorry, follow-up question?
Yeah, a real quick one. Now you made me forget it. No, because I'm looking at it from a public perspective. Like if this information, when it finally goes out, we projected for 2028, and for all kinds of reasons, it gets delayed for, another year, maybe even 18 months. I'm just looking at it from that perspective and what it creates in the community and how people look at it to begin with, so that was it, yeah.
First off, I'm pretty impressed with the plan. I mean, the number's still scary when you get way down to the bottom, but it wasn't ever not gonna be scary. Moving dispatch to Station 2, moving the schools, I think really allowed us the flexibility to do a lot of things. Did I read that correctly then?
It's only at Station 2 temporarily.
Okay, so that's, all right.
Yep.
But getting the schools out, at least, it seems like we're able to utilize space in a more,
Water billing's also moved out.
just a better manner. So I think that was important. And then maybe at least from my perspective, I'll have a question at the end, but maybe Mrs. Darius' thoughts as well. I look at our role as the Blue Ribbon Committee to, in very broad strokes, say this is roughly what we're going to do. This is roughly what we expect it to cost with relatively real numbers that have the inflation escalators in there and everything, which they do. And we're using professionals who do this all the time, so we're hopeful that the numbers are within the margin of error. But I don't look at our role as, picking light switches or contractors or maybe which phases, and this is where my question is. So we've got 9 phases. Structurally, when this goes to council, in the city's opinion, do we approve funding through phase 5? Do we approve all 9 phases? It's up to the council essentially to prove how they want to approve it. But in your expert opinions, what would be the most logical and fiscally sound way to approve a project?
So I can speak to that. So, we looked at it and we said up to phase 6 would give you a really great functional space for the PD as well as the point of service, and the floors above would be pushed out until it works financially. And yes, it's inconvenient for staff because there'd be staff relocated for long durations, but fortunately we have flex space that was built into the DPW project that allows for that. So it is inconvenient, but it's functional. So our thought was that ideally we're going to try to get up to phase 6, and that means through the phasing process, through the as we do the design, we're going to try to compress those prices down as best we can. These are prices based on what are shown now, without doing the fine, really drilling in and seeing what else can we do to reduce costs. And we may do that, and we may find, oh, geez, costs may go up because of who knows, a structural issue or something, market-wise. But
Can we add one more column? And what is the construction time? Once you start, the construction time for each phase?
Duration, in other words, right? Whenever it starts, whatever the anticipated duration
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
Just to go back for a second. When it says 28 in the bid year column, we're talking the 28-29 budget year. Is that right?
It runs from
Not
July,
calendar 28.
July 1,
to-
2027 to June 30th, 2028. It's that bid year.
It's
Or
got
That's
fiscal
what you
year
mean by-
2028.
That's what you mean by 28 in this column, the 27,
If we're
28?
talking about bid year, that would be our fiscal year for bid.
So when we were thinking about bid year and when this would go out to bid, when would construction, we were thinking about it as calendar year. Like, okay, contractor X, you're gonna start in February of 2028 or March of 2028. I realize that that's a different fiscal cycle, so we'll have to, I guess ultimately when those things get worked out, there will have to be a reconciliation of bid year versus calendar year and how that, what that means for funding and bonds. But from a construction side, we think about calendar year, you're starting in March, we're starting in April, that sort of thing. And that's how we were thinking about that is,
That's helpful.
you know, and so what Joe and Peter said is that, you know, basically a year and a half till the beginning of 2028 would go very fast. So that's, you know, we will need that window at least to get
Those
the
are not
project
hu-
approved,
those are not
do the
human
design
beings,
and
yeah.
get it going.
Yeah.
So that early 2028 seems like that's the reasonable time.
Take from July 1, if the funding isn't approved until July 1 of 2027, it will take until 2028 to get through the bidding process anyway, and to get to, you know, to get to that, to bond it, to do the RFP, to get the bids, to select and to start, so.
So it's more than building a shed in the backyard.
Councilor Bagley's close.
Just for people watching along at home, because we're talking about bid year, fiscal year, all this. I mean, we should keep in mind, this is a very complex project. We haven't finished the work here, it still has to go to council. This is like a timeline, and it'd almost be better if it was like 28 said year 1 and 29 said year 2, and because we really don't know. It might be 28, it might be 29, and I don't want people thinking, okay, shovels are gonna go in the ground on this date, because we have no way of knowing that yet, so.
And I understand all of that, I just needed to understand what that figure meant, what those years in the bid year column meant, and I get that, I understand it's not building a shed in the backyard.
The only reason why the actual years are important is the escalation. Construction estimators have escalated. So 1 year from now, escalation versus 2028 or 29 escalation. That's the only
If year
reason.
one gets pushed off another year, then those figures don't include the appropriate escalation.
That's right. But
Exactly.
all of this can be
The,
changed.
the other chart that would be good to do, to make sure that if this all can get done, how that fits in with the city's ability to bond.
Absolutely. In other words, what bonds roll off to give us more.
Yeah,
capacity.
I mean, you know, you want to keep it within the percentage.
Yeah.
And we'll say, and I'm gonna be hopeful that the whole $58 million gets approved. Let's make sure that it is feasible bond-wise to be able to get that within the limits that we have.
We got spin down on the middle school.
Yeah.
That's coming up.
And 42 is already in there as well.
Exactly, and I already asked the finance department to get us numbers, to get those numbers, to start looking at percentages in the CIP budget and how much we would have free in the CIP, not based upon approvals, but based upon bonding timeframe. So,
Rick?
Richard, phase one is more than the detectives, given that, you know, it's a very expensive phase, so I assume you've got moving costs and other things built into that. How much of that includes the getting started on the HVAC and other issues that this building needs?
That would be, so it gets into nuance, but we would, as we fit out floors like the detectives floor, we would want to address the HVAC issues in that floor.
So you're going floor by floor?
Right, so what we'll see when we actually sort of go through the phases, there's these clean lines where we say, we're going to do this floor, we're gonna do this floor, we're gonna touch this space, and there are these nice clean lines that make us happy. The reality is it's gonna spider web more. What we will likely ultimately see is that in those first 1 to 2 phases, we will likely need to add shafts or do some sort of vertical, vertical infrastructure in those first one or two phases. Thank you. First phases, so that as we do future phases, we have infrastructure we can tap into. We're not at the point yet where we have defined exactly what those are and what that cost is isolated yet. That's something that we will be working on, but there will be a strategy to that.
In the later phases, up on the fourth floor in particular, I mean, the legal department and the city manager, to me, don't seem like they need much other than their HVAC systems.
And that's
What else is in the multi-million-dollar budget?
when you look at the sort of the major or minor renovation numbers that we include, when we say minor renovation and that we carry a cost per square foot for that, That includes, finishes and stuff, but that includes doing the HVAC, the infrastructure, all of that. But to do that work, you have to tear down all the ceilings, rip out all the piping, rip out all the ductwork, redo that all, and put it back together. So you're not moving walls, you're not really moving doors, like the overall physical boundaries stay substantially the same. But you have to sort of rip out all the guts above the ceiling to solve those HVAC type issues.
Even on the fourth floor, can't.
Even on the fourth floor, I mean, it's, the space itself is operationally, works well. I know we've gone completely, I'm trying to get there.
There's more detailed slides as we go, and you can see that what's in those particular areas. So,
Just very quick-
answering your question.
Just very quickly, if I could, when we get to a place when we're ready to, and we're getting closer and closer to engage the construction manager for pre-construction services, not to build it, but to look at this from a builder's perspective, those phasing lines will move. They'll come to us and say, boy, if you move that line 10 feet this way, I can accelerate this. So those lines the phasing lines will definitely move, so,
Yeah.
right, so.
Potentially save money.
Absolutely, or save time. But, they'll come some of them might be uncomfortable because we make them move some things we're not anticipating, but that's the nature of a project like this, that's all.
It's their job.
Yeah.
Pick up on things like
And then very quick, because I can't resist it, on the fourth floor, there are several spaces, at least 4 bathrooms, kitchens, that literally have not been touched since 1965.
Yes.
Flooring, walls.
They were that good.
They've served us well, is what I tell people. This building has really served us well, but it's time. It's time. There's things up in valves that are up in the ceilings. We're gonna be doing all this work below. And then we're still gonna be left with some piping and valves that, we need to get to. We don't want them raining down into our new spaces, so you can't ignore them.
Should we go to the phases?
I think we should. So I think overall, Carl alluded to this some, but the phasing strategy we took was knowing funding and knowing priorities is police department first. As much of the police department as we can accomplish the target is that. Secondly is point of service. And then lastly, the strategy was try to move people once. How can we build a space out, move someone there, instead of moving people multiple times, the disruption and the added cost that is entailed with that. And it works out quite nicely. I think the reality that Joe alluded to is the phases will blur and blend as we have to do infrastructure things and get more input from city staff, from the construction manager. So the overall approach is phase 1, 9 phases total. Phase 1 is the detectives floor. The first thing we do is we get building and planning, relocate them temporarily to DPW, and I say temporarily for potentially a number of years. But they would do that.
And they're not hearing this for the first time. At this meeting, we've already met with them to talk about that, to explain it.
You gotta sell that.
The good news is, that was attractive was at least they're moving into brand new space and not having to put up with this noise or anything else with the construction. So we did talk to
My
them.
staff didn't hear about it until today.
What? But keep in mind what that means. It means that a lot more public going to the DPW to interact with those departments. So it affects residents as well, and people that use those services. So it's a big change.
Do you have room at DPW to take care of those places?
We do. The challenge will be parking, which we anticipate chatting with the budding property owners. They have a bunch of vacant space to see if we can come to an agreement to use some of their space.
Good neighbors.
Yeah, good neighbors. It's going to be tight. We have a meeting coming up, but we should we have a large flex space that was intended to be a new training area and a backup assembly area if we needed additional places, like if the council chambers were shut down and the council had that type of activity. So it's large enough for that. It's about 4,000 square feet.
Just a little over 4,000.
Yeah. So, given the need is 5,200 square feet?
Correct, yeah.
So it's a little smaller than the space they initially identified, but we'll look at doubling up, and using some conference rooms as office space, and it'll be cozy. It'll be cozy.
Joe can move into your office.
But we're being particularly mindful of not having to rent space to do that. We'd rather see if we're gonna spend $4 million renting a space, let's put $4 million into this building instead and use
I
space
thought you
that
were gonna say
is.
4 million in DPW.
No.
So you've got moving in and out, moving out and moving back in, costs figured in.
Yeah,
But that's what the move once philosophy, they'll move once, but they're gonna be there for a while.
Okay, as Peter said, we have a meeting in 2 weeks to walk through and work through more detailed logistics of how that can operationally work, but we feel comfortable that it can be made to work.
Can I just, one thought, you know, when we renovated and built a new plant for Seacoast Meeting Room, the architects would always put the managers on the outer wall with windows for every manager. And we said, well, managers could go on the inside wall, and the open floor with the windows could be for the, you know, in this case, the detective. So I'm just, it proved a much better work environment. And the managers could easily look out on their folks, and the folks had much nicer work.
Do keep in mind that on that floor, you have windows on both sides, unlike a deep floor plate where you could have people that truly are not abutting windows. We do have a fair amount of daylight, and it's a much more narrow floor plate than some office buildings. But that's something that we'll consider as we.
The assumption of being a hospital first is that it's gonna be a narrower plate.
Phase one.
Phase one. We renovate the detectives floor, building and planning go offsite. In addition, the school department would relocate to the high school. In this phase two, we would need to obviously outfit some swing space, and that's when we would also start site work, enabling site work that would need to happen, things like that. We've carried costs for some of those items. Phase two is when we start to get into the police department floor. The logic being that once we move detectives up, and also we would move into that flex space on the third floor, the records and courts up to the third floor. It's not their ideal location, but it can work temporarily. That frees up pretty much the whole left half of the first floor that we can take sort of that half offside, renovate that area within the building. Phase three, we would then now do the Sally Port addition. And I guess I didn't say what that is. Also, we need to do the police department lobby in two parts. It's sort of the linchpin. We can't move the lobby. It needs to stay where it is. It has to stay operational. So the logistics around that lobby will be substantially tricky, but possible. We would build the Sally Port addition in the spaces below. At that point, we've now taken care of Sally Port, police department point of service, the patrol spaces, and then we imagine phase four. In some parts, we have 4A through D, being the remainder of the first floor, which is evidence and processing, the existing Sally Port bays, what is booking and intake, sort of that whole chunk of the building. We'd be able to do the rest of that, as well as the basement of the 63 building where all the lockers and stuff currently are. We can work that in phases as well. At that point,
On phase three, what's the dotted red line?
that would be the approximate extent of the renovation. Sorry. So that dashed red line would be sort of where we would draw that boundary. As Joe said, some places that boundary will be nice and hard, other times it's going to spider web into other areas because of how infrastructure is connected, but those are the approximate boundaries that we're defining at this point. Sorry. I should have said that in the beginning, so apologies. So once you get through phases 1 through 4, we've now addressed the majority of the police department. The only space that we haven't touched for the police department is sort of the chief space on floor 2.
Which is just not
We haven't touched that. Starting,
Just a quick question, is the school ready to take this part where they are here over to there, or is there cost in size moving over there?
So the memo that superintendent provided talked about that they're working that into their work plan, and they're looking at the cost. It's much smaller than anything that we've been talking about, and they're looking at that, and they should have those numbers by the fall. But they have space over there to move into, and then there'll be that little bit of remaining of that sort of cooperative positions that maybe are shared between finance and school that remain. Yeah. But we'll have a better
But
idea,
nothing
but it's
major.
not, oh no,
No.
it's significantly less than anything we're talking about here.
So phase 5 is when we start into this, really the second floor, and the point of service spaces. It is worth noting that when we get to phase 5, the one last police department space that remains is the courts area, that part of the addition that is part of this space. So phase 5, we have A through C, or A through D, which gets into how can we piece this apart, and these might move around a little bit. But the overall strategy is phase 5 is when we do all of this point of service addition on the front, the vault on the back. That's sort of the meat of the municipal additions, all happens on floor 2. Again, we have 5A through D as we think about how could this be pieced together, what stair would we need to do before we take one down, how do we do a temporary ramp and entrance, do we need to do a temporary trailer for point of service so you don't have members of the public having to go through the building. There's a lot of considerations in this floor that we've thought about and we'll have to continue to think about. It's one of the more challenging phases.
Of these phases, which is the longest one? Which is gonna take the longest?
Probably phase 5. Or, well, depending, I guess it depends on you. I don't know,
Don't say the
what do you
lawyer
think, Joe?
thing, what does longest mean?
Yeah.
Phase 5 constructs the addition to the building, so, and as I'm looking at this and we're talking about what influences phasing and where the phase lines are, there's also, state fire marshal has to, because we're occupied the whole time, they will have influence on the phase lines as well. We might be having to travel through some of these for egress, so hard question. I mean, it's easy to assume that the highest cost ones are going to take the longest, but 5, yeah, I have to agree, it's up there.
I just have another quick question. You mentioned maybe a trailer or something outside of the building might need to be used.
Yeah, we've discussed that idea just preliminarily, that particularly with when we talk about phase 5, we're gonna have to, you're really doing a lot of construction in the whole front of the building, but you still need to have the public being able to work with clerk, tax, and assessing who are in the back wing of the building. So the idea of having members of the public having to basically travel through, temporary construction corridors to get all the way back here could work, but may not be ideal. And that's where something like an executive trailer could be useful, because then you could bring that point of service outside of the building and keep the public going into that construction area much more minimal. Well, not into the construction, but having to work their way through.
How
temporary
much
construction.
impact between the construction at this level that's gonna be in front of the building and say it has to be moved out for a trailer, is gonna affect the parking and where that's gonna take place?
I don't like to sugarcoat this answer. It's going to be intense. Inside the building and outside the building, because we chose to work in an occupied building because it's cost effective, but it comes with a much higher level of impact to operations, staff, public, everything.
So does that mean it could go down below for the public and?
It might move 5 times. Parking might move during construction. Even parking might move.
We haven't worked out those
Yeah,
details yet.
yeah.
I mean, the laydown of the construction material, where they're gonna be staging out of is really critical.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have some initial ideas, but, the idea is to maintain public service, which means maintaining those spaces. A lot of the meetings and things that occur in the building now may have to occur at the senior center, at the community campus, at library. So there's gonna be disruption all around. This is, as Joe said, we don't wanna, construction is disruptive.
The outsized concern of the public will be the farmer's market.
Sure.
Yeah. Yep. I think we have to assume everything will be impacted in one way or another.
Yeah.
I mean, we put
Different
that over-
different degrees.
I'm frankly, that's the least of my worries.
I understand.
Because they're mobile, they
Most of the
move, they
public
come in every
roads.
week, they go out. So it's like they can adjust.
Well, there was a while where it was over in the middle school, Little Harbor, and that was fine.
Yeah, it was down here
Parrot
forever.
Ave lot was another one that was nice, yeah.
No, again, my only was from a perception from the outside, how many complaints, and not that it's not gonna happen, but
Yeah.
just again, selling it to the public. Yeah.
There will. Questions and concerns.
And I would say too, you know, we've delineated these phases in a way that we feel makes sense, and as we're thinking about, okay, how can we, with the funds we have to work with, how can we, you know, maximize that? Once we know those boundaries that we're working with, again, the CMA say, if you can do the Sally Port and the front additions all at once, we can make this go a lot faster and a lot easier, and we'll say, okay, how can we make, you know, how can we make the police department lobby work temporarily in some way? And maybe that's a change that we make, but it allows us to do all that front heavy work all at once versus as two separate, you know, things. Those are the kinds of nuances where these phases are gonna start to morph and blend as we get more and more refined and more input, particularly from a construction manager, has to think about laydown and sequencing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So phase 5 is all of those additions, point of service for the building, and the thought is phase 6 then addresses the, not much in conference room, but really the council chambers and getting that multifunction training space fit out. At that point, you have all the point of service and meeting spaces, those most utilized public spaces complete. And then you get into phases 7 through 9, which is the remainder of the building. We envision phase 7 being the remainder of floor 2, all of this space. Again, once you complete the point of service, tax assessment clerk can move over here. Now this wing is freed up that we can do work. Obviously, the chief's space would have to temporarily relocate in the building so that we can do work in that floor. But that's the thought. 8 and 9 then become the 4th floor and the 3rd floor. 8th would be the 4th floor. Again, one move policy. We've been using the 4th floor as temporary space for like HR and IT throughout these earlier phases. At this point, they can all be freed up and we can finally fit out. HR, IT, finance can move up from the 3rd floor. Sorry, Carl, you're gonna temporarily relocate so we can fix your HVAC.
The DPW.
Yep.
I welcome it.
And then the 3rd floor, which is where, you know, finance is currently, once they've relocated, now we can fit out building and planning and they can move back from DPW. And we're done. That's, in a long nutshell, that's.
Questions, comments? I just would like to highlight some of the things we've got right. John O'Leary and I have been at this since the original, and Buzz, since the original look at the police station when we were gonna go build a greenfield police station for 72 million. Now we're looking at a new police station, an entire new city hall for 58 million. And
Steel.
the police station itself, we're projecting 30 million, which is, you know, beyond the expectations that we had originally. But, you know, what are we getting? In the police station, we've got a safe Sally Port that's secure, and we can process intake prisoners and do all of that in a secure area. We're not walking them through the whole department. The evidence rooms, for those of us who've seen them, are really subpar right now, and all that evidence custody is cleaned up and sensible and safe custody of things. I think the patrol spaces, and particularly the detective spaces, are really nice. And we always said the current building is inhibiting recruiting. I think the future building will help recruiting. That's a real need we have. There's a lot of things we saw touring other police facilities, decompression areas, areas for people to sleep overnight if they a shift goes really long or emergency happens. You know, spaces that are lots of common areas for people to work together. built those in, which is great. The social workers, which are we've seen that in other departments. We're moving that direction, and we have good adjacencies for them as well. And then I really like the point of service. I like the amount of open space we have, and city clerk and tax collector, and all the things you need to do are right there. So I think that's a real win. And, you know, we went up and looked at the Dover council chambers, which are much, much smaller than ours, and said they seem to be very efficient with their space. Maybe we can take a lesson from that. So I think it's tremendous progress.
And just some comments on the total project cost relative to the city budget. It's spread out over a 20-year bond, with the bonds coming at over the course of 5 to 6 years, so they don't all hit at once. It's a reasonable percentage of our budget. It's not of the total city budget. There's no red flags here that we're overspending what our capacity to spend is. Albeit anything we spend is going to be reflected in the tax rate, but I don't feel like there's no flags to me whether or not this is a fiscally irresponsible expenditure, from the sense that it is something that the city can handle. It is something that it's an appropriate portion of our total budget, if that makes sense. The community still has to decide, is this money that we want to spend? But that's a different question. We're not going into it saying, when we were talking about the $72 million for just the police station, when you looked at that as a relative portion of the total budget versus what we were getting for it, in my mind, that leaned into, that's an over expenditure. It had some red flags. Here, why the number is always going to be higher than I want it to be, it's something that we can accommodate, and I think that's important. So now the question is, does the community want to invest in it? Can the community invest in it?
Yeah.
I'd like to request, Chief, if possible, we don't meet again until end of July, I think, that you review these plans with the commission and report back to us at the next meeting of whether or not this is something they can support. Yes.
Get the commissioner chair right here.
Doesn't make any difference, there's 3 people on the committee.
I know that. Yeah, we'll have a conversation.
Well, there's been no question over the last 3 or 4 months, the commission has not been very kind to this committee because it was supposedly dropping the ball, not doing anything. And now there's something done. Let's see if this is something that they can live with.
We can do that.
Yeah, we can do that.
I think in that vein too, we have to think about the council too.
Excuse me?
We have to think about the council too, making sure the council's in the right place too.
Just to amend what you said a little bit, Peter, it was not a lack of kindness on our part towards this committee. It is our, deep concern about the longer we take, and that's always a concern with what we are trying to do in the police department. But it was no. Hopefully,
We can only move as fast as we can.
I understand.
This committee has been over a year now, and
we were the commission viewed ourselves as a permanent nudge to the committee.
I want to say quickly, one of the things that's been important to me in this process is that we do have a phased project so that it is financially feasible for the city. And the reason I say that is that at the council level, periodically we get surprises for things that have to be done. For example, this year, a $10 million New Franklin renovation that wasn't in the planning horizon. And we need to be able to know that we have the availability and our debt capacity to take on another project if it's an emergency project we have to address. And so I didn't want to put us in a position ever that we were so close to our debt limit that we couldn't take on a critical project if there were something like a hurricane and we had to address another building, a major building, say we had to address DPW suddenly. Well, how would we do that if we're already really close to our debt limit? So I think that what Councilor Bagley said is critical, that this phasing approach and the bonding, which is really the key part, is when we're bonding, what amounts of money, is the most important factor in whether or not it's affordable for us as a city. And the more we can do, I really appreciate the measures that have been taken to get us to a place where this is not as much of an expense as we anticipated. But, you know, it will be lovely if we don't have those contingencies. We don't run over the 6.7%, you know, escalation and the additional 25% contingency. Anytime we can find ways to save money in each phase, the better off we'll be as well, which we've been very successful at as a city. So I think it's really important at this point that because we have some numbers, because we have a more developed plan, that we run this by the council so they know where we are, because we don't want to continue to proceed and not be in the same place as where
Let's
the
wait
council.
till after the July meeting when the next round of figures come in.
Well, part of what we're starting to put together is just a plan of what the next steps really are. And I think, again, if you want to have a work session with the council, if you want to do some other things, we're open to that, because we want to make sure that there's alignment along the way. And what has been helpful even in our process is all the interaction we've had helps really refine what we do. I think earlier rather than later, a check-in is good. And a work session might be a good opportunity to just talk through where the committee is at, what questions have been asked, what do you see, and then that would help define the next couple of steps before you come back before them. And then we can also talk through, you know, what sort of public engagement, other things that you might be interested in as well.
And I think the story the council needs to hear is, would it work to renovate this building and keep the police station in the same place without having to build a big wing? And we got the answer to that. And we could, everything would fit, as Rick said. But would it fit in a functional way? And now we've done the adjacencies, and it actually fits in a functional way. So that's an important story, and then the cost story. Because the council's not followed all.
I'm sorry. Just one quick question for. We have 7 members of the current council who were here as we've gone through this whole process. I just want to ask the question, if the other 2 members have not been invited for a tour of the police department, I would make a suggestion that does take place, because then you're all 9 members of the council are coming from the same place. So just a suggestion.
Great idea.
Sorry,
They already took tours, right?
All right, I didn't know that, so I figured I'd ask.
I think it's also important for people to understand this isn't 9 projects that we can pick and choose what order we want to proceed in.
That's right. There's also phase, it's one phase
Sequence of
project.
tasks.
But related to that, maybe the red line is the answer to this, and I don't expect an answer, maybe you know the answer today, but there is a certain number of these phases that are a minimum. If you start, right? So I think you should be prepared for the council work session to be able to say, if you don't go the full course, you at least have to do this.
Councilor.
Actually, just thinking, so the agenda is set for Monday, we have a meeting Monday, right? I do think we should at least do a verbal report back, because these numbers are public now. And other counselors are gonna start to get asked, what do you think of this project? Because now there's a price tag. So I think, in fairness to them, we should at least just have a quick verbal report back. We've got some initial numbers, there's still a lot of work to do. And that would be a good time to bring up maybe having a work session, because the cat's kind of out of the bag, so we can't pretend it doesn't exist. But I don't think we're ready to give a comprehensive report back, just a preliminary report that there is stuff out there that you should be aware of.
I also think at the July meeting, we should start to have more serious discussions about how to engage the public. The sooner we do that, the better, given that these figures are going to be out there and thoughts are going to be out there.
You want that report back to be under all three of your names? Because we're finalizing the agenda now, so we can do that right now. Okay. Yep. I'll add it to the agenda, just a verbal asterisk.
And we could, if we remember to, we can move it forward in the agenda so we don't have to wait till midnight to hear our 2 minutes.
8:45 this week, 8:45.
Oh, you are an optimist.
So, we did want to show for the committee a picture of sort of what this concept would look like, because it's one thing to look at plans, it's a different thing to actually see what is possible. And again, these aren't final, it's not final surfaces or anything, but just to give you an image of what Mark was to be able to create. You see a little picture of it behind us, but we wanted to be able to show that to you to just get a feel of what this may look like when it was completed. So you get a feel for, compared to what the other approach was, what this may look like. So you get to see that.
Better look than the staffing study, the massing study.
Two images, one, and then a second looking from the existing parking. And I'll leave it to Mark to really speak to it. That's more eloquent.
Well, I just wanted to add a couple of comments. Obviously, the additions, they appear as really just a single story, even though they, in some cases, are stacked as you progress down towards the selling port. But the primary goal here was to let this entire assemblage of new additions in front stay somewhat understated. So the forms are very simple masses, taking some cues from the sort of the mid-century vibe of the later additions that happened on the pond side of the building. But at the same time, looking for some references or cues from the historic buildings, such as some of the colors, looking at some of the limestone colored trim, belt courses, corner rustications, those sorts of things. Taking advantage of some color that might be there and letting that be the basis of a more muted color palette for all of these new additions. So it's a clear demarcation between what is clearly a new addition resting and juxtaposed against this historic backdrop. There's, as I mentioned, some of these rustications that you see in historic buildings, they can be very subtle, and I think the new additions, you can see in these very subtle lines that I've sketched here. Those, I'm envisioning those being recessed horses or changes in plane, giving some very subtle shadow lines, really something that is picked up at a more pedestrian scale as one approaches the building, as opposed to something that really sort of stands out from the parking lot. So there'd be subtle nuances, even though it's a fairly modern approach, but you weave in some of these textual and massing adjustments as you get closer. And it will tie, even though it's a very modern approach, it will tie this addition very subtly to some of the lines that we find in historic building.
Thank you.
I think it's important to note that the view line is still there to North Church downtown.
Yes.
And I think that's why concept B got sort of dropped. The blocking that really didn't make a lot of sense when we had A and C. Yeah.
Helps public comment.
Just a question from my untrained architectural mind. I presume the building material is not concrete, it's a paneling of some sort or like that. We're not proposing like kind of this pillbox texture.
We have not dove into specific materials, but it's something that we could look at. Stone, there's manufactured stone products that have they install similar to like brick or CMU, but they have a size and a scale akin to a limestone, sandstone, something like that. So no, it's not gonna, we would never make it look like a bunker. That would not be. And that's where you start to see the notions of the subtle lines and the coursings. We can do recess courses, we can do, rusticated banding, things to add some texture at a, as Mark said, a pedestrian scale that help break it up versus here's a concrete box.
Thank you.
Sue?
Quick question, bringing in the public, my ultimate question is, the city council is the final yes or no vote on it. How, with the last go around, how many phone calls or emails or what have you did you as a collective get about either pro or pushback? I'm mainly concerned about pushback, but.
My recollection is, I was concerned by the price. The public pushback was concerned about the view obstruction.
Well, I'm just
Primarily,
trying to-
most of the comments and most of the pushback had more to do with the look and less to do with the cost.
I'm thinking like 20 to 40 emails, something like that.
Yeah,
That's why I mentioned about the architectural drawings, because most of us are not architects. So when we look at something, we see, oh, why are we doing it out of cement? But it's not cement. It's just you have to put a structure to show things.
Less subtly, the picture in the Portsmouth Herald of the massing study killed the first go around of this.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, except the problem with that is, and having been through a lot of this with Joe in years past, the first go-around is boxes. And that's the ordinance, the way the ordinance is written. That's how you have to submit it. And unfortunately, people look at it, that's gonna be an ugly building. Well, once you put windows in it, doors in it.
Yep, there was a whole bunch of problems, but that was the outcome.
Yeah.
It was that picture.
There may be a reason why we're not just showing you a big block.
Unfortunately, is that a two-stall Sally Port?
Yes.
Yes.
Becomes very prominent as you're driving by the building.
Well, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to recess it, put the doors in shadow a little bit.
Yeah.
We wanted it to look more softer than if it's just like DPW style overhead doors,
Yeah.
that are flush with the face of the building.
Iron torchier.
Exactly.
For
And-
prison.
And remember, as you turn that corner, you're not looking at it, it's to your side, you're looking down, the roadway's still there, the
And
community's
the-
still visible.
That function being in that place was so critical that, that's where it had to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we have time for public comments.
Yes.
Rick, how does this meet the master plan? It doesn't.
We had review of prior questions. Do we want to do that?
We don't need to do that. I think the key is you're gonna do a report back at the council meeting. We have the July 29th. What we'll do is also look at possible dates if you wanna do a work session. We can make sure that happens. And then public comment.
Public comment?
I have just one
Yes.
quick request. The meeting in September on the 9th, I'm gonna be out of town, but I will be back in town around 3 o'clock. If that meeting could be held at 4 o'clock, I could make it, but that's just a request, not anything other than that.
Everyone should be aware I'm calling into the next meeting, because I'm on the road on the 29th, so I'll have to call in.
And if I did call in on the 29th, I would be on the road.
Any other items before public comment? Folks have been waiting patiently.
Is there anything?
Anybody on Zoom?
Will be adjourned?
Um,
Oops, excuse me.
Let's talk for a second about work session dates. It's really gonna depend on what the council's schedule looks like and their availability, so if we have a work session with the council, it'll be in the evening. Usually we try to do those before council meetings, if possible, so the July council meeting is on the 13th, the evening of the 13th. So everyone should maybe mark your calendar as, that's a possible date if we do a work session with the council.
And we'd go to the work session.
Yes, the July 13th date for the council, because the council only meets once in July. But if it doesn't work for everyone, we'll end up looking for another date. And,
Well, the work session would be something would be put on by the consultants and staff. The committee would basically just be there in support.
Yeah,
Yes.
joint work session.
Are we anticipating that presentation to be almost very similar to what we did today,
It
perhaps?
would be similar. I think the other is you've got, if you're meeting on the 29th, the other one would be August 3rd.
yes,
And that way you'd be able to refine anything, make sure you have whatever you need to do, anything that has changed before you bring it to the work session on August 3rd to the council,
yes,
potentially.
potentially.
Loosely, what time would the work session on?
Usually they go from 6 to 7.
6 to 7.
And I would lean towards August third,
Probably-
just 'cause July
August is
is,
probably easier.
a lot of people are away.
A lot of people
Yeah,
are away.
So do you want to preliminarily?
Yeah.
about that?
See how you make
Let's
out
see
that
what
night.
works better.
Yeah, we'll find out Monday night what,
There we go.
yeah.
July and November, when we drop down to one meeting, it's always a long one.
Yeah.
Anything else? Nope. We welcome a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody, for your work.